Last time that it was this tenuous back in 2011, there was a compromise reached as well. So he was vice president during that time. So this initial meeting, I mean, it is important. Don't get me wrong at all. It is important because it does at least set a marker and opens up the floor to some type of discussions. For the last several months, we hadn't even had that.
So, Mario, this is like one of those things I always get nervous that, like, our listeners or viewers are like, I'm out of here. Debt ceiling, who cares? Like, we've been here before, right? So,
or they've been hearing it all day long for 2 weeks already.
and then they matter when they don't get their Social Security check or some benefit, right? Or it's like, that's what it really matters. So, what is likely to be on the table when a deal does get done? Because at some point they'll get something done.
Yeah, well, it's hard to forecast at this point what's going to be at the table. We do know, Carol, to your point, the minute that viewers, our listeners, and average voters out there start hearing about things like delayed Social Security checks and those type of things, that's where those phones to the congressional offices get to ringing. Some of the low-hanging fruit that I would say that's out there that I've, in just speaking with sources, maybe clawing back some of that COVID funding that went out to the states. Maybe there's something to be done on welfare to work as well. Republicans who I've spoken to point to a ballot initiative in that Wisconsin Supreme Court race last month that while the Democratic justice ended up winning that race, there was a ballot initiative on conservative principles, particularly welfare to work, that played quite well. So maybe that may be some place at the White House and the House can find some room for compromise.
Apparently, Mario, and I just learned this, I don't remember hearing about it in school, but in the 14th Amendment, there's a clause that talks about the fact that the federal government has to pay its debt, and nobody can stop it from paying its debt. They put it in there because they had unruly Southerners back then after the Civil War, and they were worried that the Southerners would challenge, the Union debt. Now we have what looks like, at least from the Biden administration point of view, unruly Republicans that are challenging the U.S. government's ability to pay its debt. Why don't they just say, look, this is constitutional. We have to pay our debt. The debt ceiling is unconstitutional. Just, barrel through.
Well, you've seen President Biden kind of flick at that in some ways, where he says that this is part of the democracy that we have, that America has an obligation to continue to pay its debt, to be good stewards over that debt as well, to be good faith creditors, and essentially saying that this is an obligation, this is a constitutional obligation. What the White House has stopped short of saying, President Biden in interviews over the last week, as well as Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen, Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre, they've all stopped short of saying that they would support or that the president would go for that 14th Amendment legal argument. That's something that hasn't been done before. It's very tenuous, and it will leave markets just as jittery as they are right now, if not more jittery, because it will definitely be challenged by Republicans in court.
Yeah, I have to think that, the president came out and said, yeah, we got, this is real. Don't you think that would create some nervousness in the markets? I mean, I don't know. It feels like a bigger issue, and I guess as someone who does vote, you do wonder when we're going to get our financial house in order, but I just feel like we just constantly pass it from administration to administration. So as Americans, as investors, what is the smart conversation that we need to be having here?
Well, I guess that's a great point that you raised, just civically even, whether or not this needs to be. There is some murmurs here in Washington, D.C. about whether or not this should continue to go on each and every year. We see these fights kind of bubble up, as I mentioned before. The last big one was in 2011 when Joe Biden was vice president. So there has been some whispers in Washington about whether or not there's some type of solution to ensure that the debt going forward, we won't have to have these type of conversations. But as we see right now, this is, whether we like it or not, it's a political cudgel that either side is able to kind of employ in order to extract some of the things that they want out of this town.
Yeah, well, I have a feeling a lot more to come on this. Mario Parker, thanks for checking in with us. White House and politics team leader at Bloomberg News there in our Washington, D.C. bureau. While we were talking Rivian out with their earnings, you want to talk about it, Matt?
Yeah, Rivian, we saw Lucid come out yesterday and disappoint the market, and now Rivian has come out as well with, I guess, earnings that beat, frankly. The adjusted loss per share was $1.25, and we were looking for $1.56. So we say a narrower loss than had been anticipated. They also had revenue that was slightly higher. The street was looking for $660.3 million, and Rivian came out with revenue of $661 million.
Stock's up 3% in the aftermarket.
Yeah, so I guess the street likes that. I'm still looking for, coming through the release, looking for any change to their production target, because we did see that with Lucid. They said they're not going to produce as many vehicles as they had thought they were going to.
There is a headline that says it affirms its EV output plan.
So 50,000 vehicles. Yeah, there you go.
It?
So, still sees full year production of 50,000 vehicles. The estimate was for them to raise that a little to 51,462, but they could still make that throughout the year, obviously.
Yeah, start down 24%, 25%.
I like the SUV version. Have you seen the SUV version of the Rivian?
I have not.
Very cool.
TBD. I'll have to check it out. This is Bloomberg.
In case you missed it, our latest Business Week podcast features Cheryl McKissick-Daniel, President and CEO at McKissick, on the U.S. office real estate outlook. Download it now at Bloomberg.com or wherever you get your podcast.
All right, Matt, just breaking down Rivian earnings. We're seeing the stock rally in the aftermarket, up about 2.5%. We're going to break down, go a little bit more through the quarter and the outlook. We're going to check in with our own Bloomberg co-host at Bloomberg Technology, Ed Lozo. He's stopping by in just a moment.
Now, your 3-day weather forecast on Bloomberg 1130.
We're going to have a mix of cloud and sun for the rest of today, along with a slight chance of a shower passing through. And for tonight, becoming clear, low temperature in the city, about 50, 40s in the suburbs. Tomorrow, we all warm up, mostly sunny skies, low to mid 70s, followed by 50s at night. And even warmer on Thursday, mostly sunny then, 75 to near 80. This is Gary Best with your 3-day weather forecast on Bloomberg 1130.
Breaking news first.
Crossing the Bloomberg terminal, former President Donald Trump found liable for sexual assault in the E. Jean Carroll suit. The jury also finds Trump liable for defaming Carroll. They didn't find him guilty of rape, which was one of the choices that they had.
It's an historic verdict against the former president. Swing voters.
It's been priced into it for years. He's had a history with women, but an actual finding in a court has more of an effect than just talk.
Continuing coverage and complete analysis on Bloomberg 1130.
The New Deal created American infrastructure that unleashed new opportunity. Today, we're doing it again with massive investment in modernizing our infrastructure to build for tomorrow. At Build America Mutual, we protect your municipal bond investments that help make it happen, building a vibrant future for our communities and your portfolio. Invest in the future of America with BAM insured bonds.
When they're investigating, we can't stop watching. This month on BritBox. Sit back, relax, and enjoy watching the detectives. Discover Britain's most bingeable mysteries, including the brand new season of Grace, the hit series based on the books by best-selling author Peter James. Unwind with the detectives you could watch all night long. Stream them all now exclusively on BritBox. Endlessly intriguing. Start your free trial at BritBox.com.
This is MasterCard. Opening doors, narrowing gaps, and driving real change. This is solidarity in action. MasterCard is committed to creating an economy that includes everyone. Through investment, through technology, through partnership. By leveraging our powers and networks to create true transformation. By implementing in speed and scale. Not long ago, it was a promise. Today, it's progress. And where we're headed is priceless.
Geopolitical risk, changing regulation, economic uncertainty. EY can help you identify the risks that matter. When it comes to the complexities you're facing, it isn't just about the numbers. To keep ahead of changing business needs and evolving regulations, CFOs, boards, and audit committees need critical insights to make better decisions. For more insights that matter, visit ey.com/beyond the numbers.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash. It's 4:21 on Wall Street. We do check markets all day long at Bloomberg. Lots of earnings after the bell. We begin with Airbnb. The shares are trading lower after hours, down now by 9.77%. Airbnb delivered a muted forecast for revenue in the second quarter, suggesting rising prices and a murky economic outlook are beginning to weigh on consumer appetite for trips. Rivian Automotive shares, they are higher after hours. Rivian right now is up by 2.8%. Rivian reported a narrower than expected loss to start the year and reaffirmed its annual production plans as efforts to cut costs boost the electric vehicle maker. Again, after hours right now, Rivian now up by 3.4%. Wynn Resorts reported adjusted EPS for the first quarter that did beat the average analyst estimate. And after hours, we do have shares of Wynn. They're up now by 2.3%. The Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ all slumped ahead of a critical inflation report, while the debt ceiling impasse weighed on investor sentiment. S&P down 19 points today, a decline of 0.5%. Dow Industrials down 56, drop there of 0.2%. NASDAQ down 77, a decline of 0.6%. 10-year yield 3.52% with the 2-year 4.03%. Spot gold up 0.7% to 2,034. Bitcoin today up 0.3 to 27,643. And West Texas Intermediate crude up 0.5%, 73.49 a barrel. I'm Charlie Pellet, and that is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. Carol Massar, along with Matt Miller, live in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker studio on YouTube and Bloomberg Originals. You want to talk Rivian a little bit?
Yes. Well, we have Ed on the line, right?
We do.
Sometimes, I'll tell you what, I love talking to Ed about cars so much that occasionally after work, I'll just call him up.
I'm so sorry, Ed. Joining us right now in our weekly plugged-in segment is Bloomberg News co-host of Bloomberg Technology, Ed Ludlow, in our San Francisco bureau. I say that with love. All right, Rivian. We see the share price moving in the aftermarket.
We should
now
also
about
say,
5%. What?
Ed knows more about Rivian than I think anybody at Bloomberg, because he's been to the factory. He's interviewed the CEO. He is truly an expert on the company. So that's why I always tap him for knowledge. What do you think about the release?
Gosh, you've set the bar high for me.
No pressure.
I mean, you know, based on the earnings season so far in EV makers, the lack of surprises, the lack of negative is clearly the takeaway from investors. You know, sales on estimates, losses are really narrowing. The belt tightening that's gone at Rivian, simplifying everything, going back to basics is working. I would note, Matt, that production dropped sequentially quarter on quarter, but that was only in the van that Rivian builds for Amazon. The consumer car, they ramp production, and now they're just being disciplined, and you see that reflected in the narrowing loss.
I don't see that broken out on the older data. I know they're doing that now, but if I type in BI space AUTMN, I always look to see, because I want Rivian to make more of these cars so that the wait list isn't so long and so that the price isn't so high, so I can eventually at least dream about getting one. Right now, I'd have to wait at least a year, wouldn't I?
Yeah, I heard you guys talking about the other big piece of news, I suppose, which was reaffirming guidance for the year, 50,000 units. I think that's pretty conservative. You guys remember that I reported a few weeks ago that 4 days after earnings, executives at Rivian guided staff internally at an all hands that actually they're on track to build more like 62,000 units this year, 12,000 more than they guided investors. I'm sure that didn't go down well with Rivian's IR department, but that's what we're told by sources.
You know, I'm looking at some BI research. It says Lucid and Rivian lose more than $200,000 on every EV they sell.
Are these two lumped together? I feel like I didn't know Lucid was really as much of a player. I mean, they only sold like 1,400 cars in the last quarter, right?
Yes.
So
yeah, and in the last quarter, Rivian built almost 10,000. You know, Lucid is saying it may deliver 10,000 in the year. So, you know, I think the narrative around Lucid is that it may never break out of being a niche, high-end luxury player. Rivian is ramping and seeking volume production, and the other kind of forecast from them is they're targeting gross profitability into 2024, and a big part of the thesis they outline is that will come with greater volumes.
So how are we supposed to look at these companies? Do we look at them as growth companies because we are pivoting in terms of the marketplace? Like, how do we look at them?
I think they trade at a multiple that's so high we don't even list it on the Bloomberg.
Well, they don't make money, so that's a multiple. You have to have an E to have a PE ratio.
Should we assume that all of these guys are going to ultimately make it in the end, or not necessarily?
A little bit of sort of insider Bloomberg thinking. Every time we write a story, I always ask myself, what's the context the reader needs to know here? Usually paragraph 3 or 4. Remember that Rivian's IPO in November 2021 was the 6th biggest in US history. It had the creme de la creme of institutional backers and strategics like Amazon and Ford. That was the reason that we set it apart from the big pool of other EV startups that are chasing Tesla. It has actually maintained that lead on the basis it's building at much higher volumes than all these other upstarts.
How hampered has Rivian been by the supply chain snarls? I mean, is that really the story here? Is that what's holding them back? Or has demand died down for these vehicles?
So it continues to be a problem. It is listed as an ongoing headwind in the earnings letter. You know, RJ Scaringe, the CEO, in 2021 and into 2022, he was phoning up the CEOs of his suppliers and saying, come to the factory, tour it with me. I can demonstrate to you that if you send me more parts, particularly semiconductors, I can build more cars. This is not an issue of like what the end demand is from Rivian's perspective. They just had to demonstrate, like, give us the parts, guys, we'll build them. They still have a backlog, although they've stopped breaking out their reservations. I think the story of Rivian is very much it's supply constrained. Its orders or reservations are still quite a lot greater than the number it can build each quarter. So it's going to be hard to see when that demand curtails off.
So go to the balance sheet. So it looks like cash equivalents were $11.2 billion at the end of the first quarter, so down from $11.6 billion in the previous 3 months here. We talked about what they're losing per vehicle. I mean, so what's the runway that this company has?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. In the quarter gone, they tapped the green bond market, which was quite an interesting move. They also did it with convertibles, which can have a dilutory effect on the shares. So the stock reaction was negative. But they have a lot of money. CapEx is really interesting. It was about $280 million in the quarter. The street thought it would be $500 million. It's more evidence that the belt tightening's working. There are really long-term questions about how that $11.2 billion of cash and cash equivalents lasts, how long it lasts, and what they might have to do to raise more capital. But Rivian has always said